Hi, I'm Kitty King, and I am the author of Cinematic Dark Romance. If you love Hitchcock tension and Tarantino action with blazing spice, I write it.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story, where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week I am sitting down with author Kitty King. I am so excited about this conversation where we'll explore the different series in the Kittyverse, including the Color series, which is the electric dark college romance series that first introduced me to Kitty King books. And we're having this conversation just in time because Kitty wrote a second-generation series called the Cult Campus series, which launches this July. We'll also dive deep into what it's like to write kink, to deconstruct shame, liberating ourselves from the concept of perfect characters or perfect survivors, and embracing all the flaws that make these stories so compelling. Make sure to stay with us to the very end, as Kitty will read a beautiful love letter that she wrote to her readers. Kitty, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so happy to be sitting down and having this conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
There are so many topics that I want to unpack with you today, but what I would most like to just dive into is your background and how you shifted into becoming an author. Can you talk us through that? Because I was shocked on our pre-production call when you talked about your journey.
I guess it is pretty strange. I am a board certified psychiatrist. I was practicing for quite a while, mainly inpatient, but I also did psychotherapy. I was a clinical academic educator as well, so I taught residents and medical students. For those that don't know, a psychiatrist is a medical physician specializing in mental health. So I was between jobs. I went from inpatient to telework. And when you're getting state licensure and things like that, it takes a long time. So I had about a 6-month break. And I don't know, being a doctor, I was bored. So I started making a bucket list. And on my bucket list was write a book. And I think everyone always expected me to write some mental health book or science book, but I did not want to do that. My entire life revolved around psychiatry. And so I just wanted to do something fun. I plotted Red Night, and I had no real fiction experience. I'd written lots of poetry, but not fiction. And I thought, well, the only way to get better at fiction is to write it. And so I sat down and I wrote Red Night in about 10 days. And I never expected to publish it. I just wrote it for me. I wrote it for my best friend. We had some laughs about it. And she said, "Oh, you have to publish it." And I showed my husband, and he said, "Well, why not publish it?" And I said, "Oh, you're right. Maybe like 25 people out there will read it. That would be wild if 25 people would read this book that I wrote. That would be cool." So I just made an Instagram on Valentine's Day. I told people about the book, and I don't it just went wild. I had no idea what I was doing. By that point, I had written the rest of the series just because I had the ideas in my head and I couldn't stop once I started. They just all tumbled out really fast. And I thought, well, that's cool. I'll give people these 3 books and that'll be fun. That'll be it.
Oh my gosh. And so you're saying it so casually, and I'm cracking up over here because one, you're an inspiration that you can just sit down and publish this incredible book in a matter of days. That is wild to me, but that's where I found you. I saw you on social media. I saw posts about Red Night, and I was immediately intrigued, dove right into the book and loved it, and then started to explore the rest of your color series. So let's talk a little bit about that first book and your characters, some of the dynamics going on, because I went in blind. I didn't really look up much of it. I saw something on social media. I bought it, laid down outside, and was like, oh, I'm just going to read in the sunshine. And then I
Yeah.
went on a journey with you. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about Xavier and Marissa and a little bit of the plot of this book?
I had read enough dark romance to know what I personally like to read, but also I am a huge fan of Hitchcock. I'm a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino, and so to me, kind of getting them in the end was my whole shtick. I didn't want it to be boring. I wanted it to move fast, and I wanted it to be entertaining. I get bored very, very easily. I read extremely fast. I mean, you kinda have to, as a physician, you have to read a lot fast. And so I was used to boring books. I didn't wanna write boring, and so I wanted it to move quick, and I wanted Xavier to be antisocial. I wanted him to be a good character. I think a lot of writers put these labels, mental health labels on characters, which I don't like because everybody's different. And it's just kind of a gimmick. So I've not labeled him as such, but he certainly had qualities of antisocial personality disorder. The charm, where you think that everything's fine, everything's good, and it was until he didn't get his way. And then that's when you see the rage underneath of it. And that's what always makes me laugh when people are like, that's so out of character. Well, first of all, it's my character. Second of all, no, it was definitely in character. You just got fooled by the charming nature of the antisocial part. So, yeah, that's what I wanted. And then Marissa, I wanted her to have cluster B characteristics because we always call it a match made in hell, two cluster B personalities. And and it was the most drama, and I found that interesting. So I thought, well, that will keep things moving. So I wrote two flawed characters and had them stick together.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. And your books are so well paced. They're about the farthest thing from boring out there. And yes, the plot twists and the pivots, it was all incredible. So I loved that book. And that's what really pulled me into your color series and made me want to read more of those books. And one of the other books that really stood out to me was White Hole and the dynamic between George and Kinsley. And I just want to give you the floor. Can you talk about that book? Because it has a lot of layers. And I just really want to hear from your perspective what inspired you to write it and tell me what you think of those characters.
Yeah, actually, by that point, I had written Red Knight in a few days, and I say 10 days. That was the first draft. Obviously, I did more drafts and had editing after that. But then, while it was being edited, I wrote Blue Film in just 10 more days, and then I moved on to The Wrong Man. Actually, after that, because I always wanted to write a murder mystery, and so as soon as I finished The Wrong Man, I jumped into White Hole. Now, by this point in my social media journey, I could get a sense that things might be bigger than I had anticipated. And I started to feel like a responsibility. This wasn't just fun and games. There was going to be more than 25 people to read this. So then I thought, well, what if I said something with the book that I wrote? I still want it to be fun. I still want it to be Kitty King. I still want it to be fast paced and erotic, but I also maybe want it to say something important. And men's mental health, is important to me, specifically, sexual assault on men, who I treated lots of. And I kind of went into it knowing that, kind of like with Red Knight, I knew I knew 50% of people would hate it and 50% would love it. And same with White Hole, I kind of went into it knowing that discussing George's sexual assault would bring out a lot of different opinions and emotions. I always find it interesting when people say that he's cheating when he's clearly being raped and exploited. So I kind of expected that to happen, but it is always sad when I do read something like that.
Oh, thank you for that. And you just went right to the core of it. And I would love to kind of pick apart some of the things you said because they are very important. The topic is important. And you're writing about shame, abuse, assault, coercion, manipulation, all of these things. And it's interesting how it's perceived in society, not even, just focusing on the readers, but just in society, it's perceived very differently when it happens to women, but also when it happens to men. And so to write about this as he's also trying to live his life, be a young man, have relationships, do all of those things, and how that conflict kind of brings everything to the surface. So I was one of those people who did not think he was cheating. I thought he was in a horrible situation. And I thought you
Yeah.
wrote about it with so much clarity and bravery and compassion. And it's the side of it that a lot of us do not see. And that's why I love that it was in the story. And it's still this very dark romance. The two main characters have this beautiful connection. And they kind of walk through it together at some point. And it was it was just a beautiful take on it. Sorry, for lack of a better words, for a really, really hard
Yeah.
topic. So I want to ask you a few questions about that of when you're taking that responsibility to bring a really sensitive topic that most people shy away from and share it with your audience, how do you go about creating that container? Yeah, whether it's trigger warnings, an author's note, how do you create sort of that consent and awareness dynamic?
I think I always start with the characters in my head. They're there, they're like a real person, and I kind of get a sense of who they are, and then I kind of, like an archaeologist, work backwards and say, "Well, why would they be this way?" And then, the story kind of develops in that sense. And so sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's not. I mean, we've all had things that have happened to us, and you can't say this one's more traumatic than another. It's all meaningful to that person. And so it would be impossible. It would be flat out impossible for me to name every content warning that somebody might get upset by. That's to me, I will do some due diligence, but it's not my responsibility either. I don't have to put anything. I'm just doing it to be nice. But I think going into it, me saying, "Hey, this is dark," it might upset you, but sometimes getting upset is the goal. Sometimes getting upset is what we need. And it's what you do with that's more important. And so, it's just like a rating on a movie. Hey, this is going to be X rated, and it's going to involve some topics that will make you uncomfortable. And guess what? It's supposed to. When I write horror, I mean, I always kind of chuckle when people write, "This was so horrific." Well, thank you. You're welcome. It was supposed to be. I'll write out things that are blaringly obvious, but I'm not gonna catch everything that might be in somebody's personal history that would upset them. It's impossible to do so. And I just kind of start from there, and that's how I do so.
Well, I think that really resonates for me because as the reader who loves your books, I'm reading them and understanding that these are stories of flawed characters. Much like
Mhm.
flawed human beings, we
Yep.
can do something, not do it well, not do it with boundaries, not do it with good intentions, and we can just be very human. And so I'm walking into it thinking, yes, it's those flawed stories. It's why I love you as a writer. And it's not a kink manual. And I would love to touch
Mm.
on that a little bit because there are readers out there who are coming from a wide range of experience and interest and education around these topics. So I loved how we were both using the word responsibility, and it's not your responsibility to educate, right? It's on
Mm.
us. But what is that like to try to tell these stories of flawed people deserving of love and connection and making it clear that it's not a kink manual? Like, I'm not teaching you about a healthy BDSM relationship. I'm talking about
Right.
these two people.
That's where I start in the author's note for, say, Red Knight. Hey, this is a messed up relationship. This is not a relationship manual, or else
Right.
why would I write it? It would be boring. I'd go write a mental health. Hey, here's how to have a healthy relationship manual, and it's not a kink manual either. Do I know about the kinks? Yeah, I'm a psychiatrist. We came up with the terms. we we literally invented the history. So, yes, obviously, but that's not what I'm writing. I am not writing a diagnosis, I'm not writing a kink manual, I am not writing word for word the DSM-5, that would be boring. But I'm taking people and we're all flawed, and I'm writing their story and how they fit it in. Do they follow rules? No, that would be boring. Why would I do that? I wanna see when they mess up. I wanna see what happens when things aren't going well. Otherwise, it's not a fiction story. And so I think sometimes and it kinda goes with the nature of getting really into rules and regulations. And somebody who's going into a dark romance thinking about rules, regulations, and boxes that they can fit into are not gonna have a good time. And so I try to warn them, "Hey, this is a journey. This is flawed characters. This isn't a kink manual. It's just people figuring it out." Is there gonna be safe words? Maybe, maybe not. What happens when you don't use one? Let's find out, and we get to do that because it's fiction.
No, you're making such good points about this topic. And I really do love it because the stories are our ways to explore some of these feelings, some of the conflict. But you're also
Absolutely.
right? Like it's a way to put ourselves in that person's shoes and think, what would I do in that situation? Is this what
It's
I want?
fantasy, and
It's
that's what
fantasy.
fantasy.
Absolutely. And so I love that we're having this discussion because I think sometimes it can be taken as how-to manuals, right? And
Yep.
I just feel like I like when fiction gets to stay fiction and we get to explore and feel safe in our exploration. Because also, as a writer, I'm seeing you take your characters on journeys of self discovery. So, yes, they have those moments of conflict, they have those moments of shame, moments where they're experiencing abuse, and then eventually a disclosure to someone, but it is ultimately a journey of self-discovery. They don't end where they start, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm thinking about
Right.
some of your main characters and even that story of George and Kinsley, and I'm referring to the book White Hole. That was really powerful. And I think it's interesting how when anyone, whether it's a writer or someone else, tries to share the story of a survivor, there is so much attention paid to the desire for a perfect survivor rather than pointing a finger at the abuser. So even in George's story, it's
That
like,
is
of
so powerful. I love that. Yes. You
well,
nailed it.
thank you. I did a lot of work with survivors throughout my career, and I'm one myself. And I think it's very, very important that we pause in those moments and not pick on ourselves and beat ourselves up. We're programmed to do that, right? But when
Mhm.
we are reading a book or watching a movie and we're thinking, why did he do that? Why is he making all these mistakes? It's like, I don't know, maybe because he's been abused for 10 years and he's struggling.
Exactly, exactly, yes.
Exactly.
Scream it louder. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
feel that way so many times when I read, reviews or people send me
Yeah.
things, they're always, blaming the person that was abused. It's like, "What?"
I know. And that's why these conversations are important because again, we come from a wide range of experiences, right? I almost had forced compassion in my life because of my own circumstances where I look at things a little differently, but that's an interesting perspective to take to immediately look at the survivor and not look at the perpetrator. And I
Mhm.
appreciate that you gave us an arc with this perpetrator. And we got to see all different sides of the dynamic and everything they did and said, and how this couple decided that they were going to navigate it. And there was this liberation from perfection, which I think is really powerful in writing. So, just for me geeking out about your writing, I just wanted to say that I love imperfect characters because guess what? I'm a deeply imperfect person. And so I really
Yeah.
appreciate reading about that. But um, of all your characters, let's say just in the color series, who are the ones that really stood out for you that just resonated the most, that you most deeply wanted to be understood by the readers?
It was, Ellen Levi in Blue Film, honestly, which doesn't get as much recognition. I understand why, everyone goes for Red Knight. and then they talk about George and Mason and Briggs as well, and Yellow Road. But for me personally, Levi and Elle were very personal characters for me. And I needed to write that book because I had just finished The Darkness of Red Knight, and the original Red Knight before the special edition ended pretty much immediately after the dungeon scene. I had people urging me to kind of write an epilogue to soothe people. I didn't like to do that. I just wanted to end it on the shocking, rip the rug right out from under your feet sort of thing. But I did eventually write a kind of calm down moment in the original. And then I jumped right into blue film, and I saw a lot of myself in Levi and Elle as well. I put some of my personality into both of those characters. So it's sometimes funny to me because people get mad at Levi, but if there was a character I've written that I'm most closely related to, it would probably be him. And then in another book, Ross Venom, I feel pretty close to the main character Cal there as well. But yeah, probably Levi.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think I maybe gravitate towards some of the polarizing characters because they inspire thought. You have to ask yourself, like, why am I reacting to this person?
Yeah,
Why am I cringing every time they're saying something or doing something? And so I just think it's interesting because it almost invites you into the story in a way of like, what am I bringing to this where I'm being reactive to this character? But
yeah,
I'm so appreciating you go so deep with me about these stories and these characters. And one of the things that completely stands out to me, particularly in this series, is your MMCs do not grovel. And I want us to talk about that.
yeah.
Let's talk about your MMCs who are magnetic and generous and over the top, but they do not grovel.
Yeah, I think Levi came the closest to groveling, but yeah, no, sometimes a good I like to read a good grovel, but other times, especially for like Xavier, he's convinced he's doing the right thing. Why would he grovel? He thinks that he's right in his head. And then George is pretty proud, and to grovel for Kinsley would just create problems of its own. So I don't see that happening either. And so those characters in the color series don't really grovel. They don't either in a few other series as well. It's just not my thing. I think that instead of groveling, just going out and fixing the issue doesn't need to be such a big deal. If the person messed up and they take responsibility and then they fix the issue, there doesn't need to be some dramatic overhaul, at the end. Just fix it. It's done.
Oh, I love that take because I also think culturally we're a little divorced from the idea of making amends and just taking care of business and doing the thing and living the apology instead of talking about it,
Yeah,
actually doing it, which
exactly.
I'm a
Yep.
huge fan of, but I'm from New York, so that might just be
Yeah,
me. But
exactly. Yeah.
I really love that, and that's such an interesting take because I didn't think of that as I was kind of reading through and thinking, "Oh, that's interesting. Why don't they grovel?" But they are living it. They're just like, "I'm
Yeah.
fixing it. I'm gonna create this life for us, and I'm moving forward, and it won't happen again." In to some degree, like this is not
Right.
what we're gonna do, or we're gonna fix it together. So, oh, I
Yep.
love that. Well, clearly your series made an impression on me. One question I had for you before we pivot to the next generation is just what is it like? And this is, we don't maybe have to include this in the episode if you don't want to. I think I'm curious. What is it like
Mhm.
writing kink and just knowing that people come from so many different perspectives and what seems, for lack of a better word, like something you do on a Tuesday, to someone else can seem like the most shocking thing that they've ever heard. And what is that like? And to share that with people and to share it with an editor and have people in your life read it.
Oh, man, I think I have always had a way overactive imagination, and I mean, I've heard everything. I I think you just get to a point and, as a mental health practitioner, you're not surprised by it's a rarity that a human being can surprise me. I live for those moments. I love those moments. I miss those moments from before I was a mental health practitioner. And so, to me, it's nothing. It's just like, what would happen if? And I kind of play off that, and I start imagining, and then I think, well, what would happen if it went wrong? And then, I play with that more. And then the readers come back and tell me, whoa, I didn't, know. But, yeah, my early beta readers, my early alpha readers have always been psychiatrists.
Oh.
And so to me, to us, it was just like another Tuesday. It was just another Tuesday. And, we're more interested in the dynamics between the characters and less so about the kinks. And, so when I write them, I'm not going based on the manual. I don't want to. I want to twist it so it fits the characters and so they use it. And that again, I start with the character themselves and what, because of their background, would they be into? What is it that they would gravitate towards? And so they always have a reason. I'm not someone who writes based on tropes. Like, I don't say, oh, I need to include these kinks and these tropes in this next book because people want that. I start with the character.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much for being generous with your answer and not really shying away from that. I appreciate it. And it's just inspiring. I think just being a creative in any space, it's really hard to talk about things that would feel totally natural for you, but you're throwing it out there and you have no idea sort of how to navigate audience feedback. I did one
Yeah.
episode of my mental health podcast where I talked about sexual health, and I used to be a sexual health educator. It was like nothing to me. I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
My goodness, the response. I was like, well, I'm just gonna disappear from now on.
Oh,
It was a little overwhelming, and I'm still okay with it, because I also think some of
yeah.
that reactivity and shame can come from a place of curiosity where maybe somebody felt like
Oh,
they weren't
sure.
allowed to be curious, right? And so
Absolutely.
they don't really know what to do with whatever feelings bubble up. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I
I
think I
digress.
think if you're in, especially if you're doing therapy and stuff, you have to let the other person know it's okay and safe and great
Yeah.
to talk about these things, fantasies, all that stuff, and you hear it all. So I always say that my darkness meter and my kink meter is broken. I have no idea how dark or light something is. I have no idea how spicy or not it is. I just try to guess.
Well, I had this interview the other day with an author named Marin Riley, and she was like, "Are you sure you want to interview me? I wrote a very dark book." And I was like, "Dark is fun. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
I used to be a therapist. I'm fine. We're good. I'm so
Yes.
excited
Yep.
about this. It's very soothing to me. So,
Yes.
well, I appreciate all of that you shared. And I would love to dive into your second generation, the Cult Campus series, which I am so excited about. I hope you've been feeling my enthusiasm about this. Can you
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit about this series, kind of what went into it and what we can expect?
When I wrote the Color series and, my dream is always in the back of my head, oh, if people buy it and they like it, I'm definitely doing a second generation. But I wanted to write other things before I got there. And so it was always in my plan. It was always in my plan to I have, kind of a writing schedule out for several years of what I want to hit. And so this was always in my plan to do this. And I had done colors, I had done the compass, I have done the calendar, and I wanted to, and it started with, okay, what would the series be called? I wanted to go back to college. I love college age. I taught, I was a medical educator for residents and med students. So I love that age. It's a great age. And undergrad, grad students love it. So I just love that time and loved spending time on campus, and so I had great memories from college. It's what I like to write. So I wanted to go back there, and I wanted it to be second generation and to stick with my sort of theme of some type of colors. So I went with days of the week. So the first book is Massacre Monday, And I don't think people understand how obsessive I get with these things, but, I developed an entire cult system. Gods, rituals, everything, and so it's all there. Uh, Kind of like with my Compass series, I had whole secret societies that, kind of overplay with this series, and, I did all of that before I plotted even one of the books, and yeah, so that's how it started.
Can you tell us a little bit about the main male character and main female character in Massacre Monday? Just like a little tidbit.
Absolutely, yeah. So, the main male character is Marissa and Xavier's firstborn son, Ryan, their oldest. He is in the epilogue of Red Knight. As a little kid, he's the one that's jumping off the dock, and Xavier's scolding him for, being a daredevil. So I always knew who he was as a person, and I couldn't wait. I knew it would be a couple years, but I couldn't wait to write his character as an adult. So he's the main male character, and I think that people were expecting him to be exactly like his father. I've seen that a lot. And he's got some characteristics of Xavier, but he isn't him, and I can't wait for you to meet him. The main female character is Pippi Friedenberg. Her parents are from the Compass series, and again, she has some characteristics of her parents, but is not just like them either. She is pretty feisty, but she's also been a protected mafia daughter that hasn't been allowed to do much of anything because she's got two older brothers and a very protective father. So, despite her tenacity and her spunk, she is still very sheltered. And Ryan is not sheltered. And I had a blast pairing them up. Their banter is some of my favorite, and they're like fire and fire, and I love it.
Oh, I'm so excited about this series. You have no idea. And I can't wait to meet them. And I love that these characters are coming from the different series. And is that your intention to weave together the different universes? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that sort of what we can look forward to with this series?
Oh, yeah. Everything fits into the Kittyverse except for, my horror series and my calendar series, which are set in faraway places that hopefully don't exist in this universe. But
Nice.
the other series all fit into this new series, and that was my intention. I always planned it that way.
Oh, that is so exciting. And as you're saying, I always planned it that way. It's funny because sometimes as a reader, when things come together, there's Easter eggs in books, you're like, "Oh my god, how did they do that?" I'm like, "They probably planned it." It
Yeah,
probably wasn't
I did.
spontaneous. She didn't write it in her notes app and then all of a sudden publish it. I'm sure she put some
I
thought into it.
I mean, sometimes I've been sitting on an idea for years and I've just been giddy to share it. And when a lot of sometimes people never see it. I had to tell people about Big G's nickname. They just thought I was making up Big G because his name was George, but Big G is the gravitational constant, which is why I named him Big G because he, was into astronomy.
Oh,
So
I love that. I love all the
a bit of
details in your
nerd.
books. No, no, no. It
Yeah.
calls to the nerd in me, and I really
Yeah.
appreciated it. So, oh, I love that. And so, as we're thinking about the direction you're going in, Cult Campus launches July 11th.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay.
7-Eleven.
Oh, that's so exciting. And then what is your plan? I mean, you just said basically you've got plans for a few years, but what can readers expect in the next year or so in the direction that this is going to take?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue the Cult Campus series. There's a planned 7 books, one for every day of the week. Every day is a different game that the Greek houses have to play. So Massacre Monday is a primal hunt, and then next will be Terror Tuesday coming out closer to Halloween this year, and that's when it takes place in the book. And that's a series of horror escape rooms and the games continue. So I'll be releasing the 7 books and also slowly releasing the Pet Motel sequels that M.A. Cobb and I have been working on for our horror hotel series, as well as some more of the calendar series novellas. So, horror novellas and erotica novellas will be coming in between the novels.
Oh, well, I'm so excited. I love that you have this whole calendar that we can look forward to. So, can you tell us what are you reading? Who are the authors that inspire you? And what books are you either kind of devouring now or looking forward to from other authors?
I read everything. Right now on my nightstand is an Aggie Morton. Aggie Morton is like a child series of like if it was Agatha Christie as a kid, and it's fantastic. So I'm finishing up one of the books from that series. One of my favorite series that I recently finished was from Emily Nealis. Her first book, Heart So Hollow, and the second one, Soul So Dark. Those were fantastic. I did an arc read from my favorite writer, Angel Lawson, Barons of Decay. Of course, M.A. Cobb, anything she writes, is fantastic. She inspires me every day. But like I said, I read literally everything from classics to YA to kids stuff, just whatever. I am a notorious DNFer. I probably stop reading about 80% of what I read if it's not holding my
Interesting.
attention. It just goes away. But if it holds my attention, it's definitely a 5 star because, it held my attention and it's really hard to keep my attention because I've read so much. So yeah, those are some favorites that I've recently read, but obviously there's a ton more authors that I really love and love to pick up their stuff.
One of my favorite things about doing this podcast is kind of hearing what's on everyone else's night table and getting so much inspiration from it. So, thank you for sharing that list. And the next thing I would like to invite you to share is the love letter that I invited you to write either to your younger self or to your readers. I'd love to just give you the floor.
Awesome. I wrote a letter to my readers. I said, "Dear reader, I don't know if you came for the romance, the rage, or the ritual, but whatever brought you here, you were brave enough to keep turning pages that didn't flinch from the messy parts, the obsessive ones, the unhealed ones, the ones that aren't polite or pretty. And maybe something in you burned and then rose from the ashes. I write the kind of love that scares people, the kind that sees all of you, even the parts you'd rather keep hidden. And you didn't look away. You kept reading, you stayed. And because of that, I keep writing. You are not background noise. You're not just a reader. You are part of the story now. You are proof that survival can be sacred and that obsession, when wielded right, can save us. So thank you for carrying my words in your bones. This is our cult. I am Kitty King, and so are you."
Kitty, thank you so much for that. As your reader, I love it and I appreciate it and thanks for all the intention you put into that.
Yeah.
So, where can listeners and readers find you?
I think the easiest place would be to start at my website, kittyKingAuthor.com. And I have that same tag on all social media. So, like Instagram.com/KittyKingAuthor, TikTok, KittyKingAuthor, and so forth. So, easiest place, kittyKingAuthor.com.
Great. And I'll make sure to put links in the show notes for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kitty, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll come back and join us to talk about the rest of the books in the series. You are always welcome. I love your books, I love your characters, and I had a great conversation with you. So thank you.
This was amazing. It was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.